Imagine being publicly humiliated in front of your helpless child, only to have a complete stranger fall to his knees before you. This is exactly what happened to David, a hard-working single father. While trying to buy a simple meal for his little daughter, an angry restaurant manager brutally slapped him across the face. David fell to the hard floor, completely broken. The crowd watched in silence, but the violence stopped instantly when a billionaire's personal bodyguard saw David's bare wrist. On that wrist was a very unique, crescent-shaped birthmark. The tough bodyguard began to shake. He looked up at his wealthy boss and cried out, "Sir, look, we finally found him." What happened next left the entire city in absolute shock. Stay tuned to find out how a simple birthmark turned a humble father's worst nightmare into a life-changing miracle. Before we start this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Turn on the notification bell. That way, you will never miss our emotional stories. Also, we love hearing from you. Please leave a comment below. Tell us exactly what city or country you are watching this video from. We truly appreciate your amazing support. Now, let us begin our story. David was a man who knew the true meaning of sacrifice. At 34 years old, his life looked completely different from what he had once dreamed. He lived in a very small, cramped apartment on the edge of the city. The wallpaper was peeling, and the pipes constantly moaned. But David never complained. He did not have the time or the energy to complain. His entire world revolved around his 5-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was a bright, cheerful little girl. She had big, expressive brown eyes and a smile that could melt the coldest heart. To David, she was a living miracle. She was also his only remaining family. 3 years ago, David's wife, Sarah, had passed away after a sudden and brief illness. Her passing left David completely heartbroken. He was forced to navigate the world alone as a single father. He had no parents to call for help. He had no siblings to lean on. It was just him and Lily against the world. David worked as a night shift janitor at a local high school. The pay was incredibly low, and the hours were exhausting. He spent his nights scrubbing floors, emptying heavy trash cans, and cleaning bathrooms. By the time he returned home in the early morning, his back would ache fiercely. His hands were rough and calloused from the harsh cleaning chemicals. Yet, the moment he walked through his front door and saw Lily's face, his exhaustion would simply melt away. He would put on a bright smile, fix her breakfast, and braid her hair for preschool. David always put Lily first. He wore old, faded clothes with holes in shoes, just so Lily could have nice sneakers. He skipped lunches at work, so he could buy her favorite storybooks. His love for her was limitless. Lately, however, times had become exceptionally tough. The rent for their apartment had increased significantly. Food prices were rising every single week. David found himself counting pennies at the grocery store checkout. He had to make heartbreaking choices between buying fresh milk or paying the electric bill on time. Despite the heavy financial stress, David always kept a positive attitude around his daughter. He made sure Lily never felt the heavy weight of their poverty. To Lily, their small apartment wasn't poor. It was just cozy. Their simple meals of rice and beans weren't cheap. They were magic pirate feasts. David was an expert at turning hardships into beautiful adventures for his little girl. One afternoon, David picked Lily up from her preschool. As she ran into his arms, she was holding a brightly colored drawing. It was a picture of a giant, golden plate filled with French fries, a massive burger, and a tall chocolate milkshake. "Look, Daddy," Lily cheered proudly, waving the paper in the air. "I won the drawing contest today. My teacher gave me a gold star." David smiled warmly, kissing her forehead. "Wow, Lily, that is absolutely beautiful. You are a true artist. What inspired this masterpiece?" Lily's stomach gave a loud, timely rumble. She giggled, blushing slightly. "I was just thinking about the fancy restaurant downtown, the one with the big glass windows and the bright lights. Some of the kids in my class go there with their families. They say the burgers taste like heaven." David's heart sank tightly. He knew exactly which restaurant she was talking about. It was called the Grand Bistro. It was an upscale, exclusive establishment meant for the wealthy citizens of the city. A single meal there cost more than David's entire weekly grocery budget. He looked down at Lily's hopeful, innocent eyes. He saw the pure joy in her face, and he just couldn't bear to disappoint her. He made a sudden decision. It was probably a reckless decision, but he didn't care. "Tell you what, sweetheart," David said, crouching down to her eye level. "Since you won the big contest, we're going to celebrate. On my upcoming day off, I am taking you to the Grand Bistro. We will sit by the window, and you can order the biggest burger they have." Lily's eyes widened to the size of saucers. "Really, Daddy?" "Promise. I promise," David said softly, locking his pinky finger with hers. For the next few days, David worked himself to the absolute bone. He took on extra cleaning shifts at the school. He even offered to clean a neighbor's messy garage for a few extra dollars. He skipped his own dinners, eating only small pieces of leftover bread. Every single penny he earned was placed carefully inside an old coffee can hidden in his closet. By the time his day off arrived, the coffee can held exactly $80. It was a small fortune to David. It was money that should have gone toward the electric bill, but he didn't care. He wanted to give his daughter one night of pure luxury. He wanted her to feel like a princess. When the special evening finally came, David and Lily dressed in their absolute best clothes. David wore his only button-down shirt. It was clean and neatly ironed, but the collar was visibly frayed. Lily wore a pretty pink dress that Sarah had bought her years ago. It was a bit too short for her now, but she looked absolutely radiant. Hand in hand, they walked through the chilly evening air toward the center of the city. When they arrived at the Grand Bistro, the sight was breathtaking. The restaurant had massive, floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Inside, beautiful crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over the wealthy diners. Men in expensive tailored suits and women in elegant silk dresses sat at tables, laughing and sipping wine. David felt a sudden surge of deep anxiety. He looked down at his worn-out shoes. He felt like a complete outsider. For a second, he thought about turning around and taking Lily to a cheap diner instead. But then Lily squeezed his hand tightly. "Wow, Daddy," she whispered in absolute awe. "It looks like a real castle." David swallowed his pride and smiled. "It does, sweetie. Let's go inside." The moment David pushed the heavy glass door open, the warm air hit them. The rich aroma of roasted meats and expensive spices filled the room. They walked up to the host's stand. Standing behind the podium was a tall, sharply dressed man named Richard. Richard was the general manager of the Grand Bistro. He was a man who took immense pride in the exclusivity of his restaurant. He judged people instantly based on their appearance. As David and Lily approached, Richard looked up. His eyes scanned David's frayed collar, his cheap trousers, and Lily's outgrown dress. A look of deep disgust crossed Richard's face. "Can I help you?" Richard asked. His tone was cold, sharp, and unwelcoming. "Yes, please," David said politely, trying to sound confident. "A table for two, please." Richard sniffed loudly, crossing his arms. "Do you have a reservation? We are fully booked for the entire evening." David looked past Richard into the dining room. He saw several empty tables near the back. "I don't have a reservation, sir, but I see a few empty tables over there. We won't take long. It's my daughter's birthday celebration." He chose to say birthday because it sounded more urgent. Richard let out a cruel, mocking laugh. "Listen carefully, my friend. This is a high-class establishment. We have a standard to maintain. Our patrons pay high prices for an exclusive atmosphere. Look at you. You clearly cannot afford to breathe the air in here. I suggest you take your child to the hot dog stand down the street." David felt his face flush with deep embarrassment. He could feel the eyes of nearby customers turning toward them. He wanted to run away, but he looked down at Lily. Her eyes were filling with tears. Her lower lip was trembling. She had been looking forward to this night for days. David couldn't let her down. "Sir, please," David pleaded quietly, his voice cracking slightly. "I have money. I can pay for our meal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled wad of cash. He held it out proudly. "See, I have $80. Please, just let us have a quick meal." Richard looked at the crumpled, small bills in David's hand. He felt deeply insulted that someone would try to pay with such petty cash in his five-star restaurant. He felt it degraded the image of the bistro. "Get that garbage out of my face," Richard hissed, his voice rising in anger. "That wouldn't even cover the cost of an appetizer here. I am ordering you to leave right now before I call the police for trespassing." "Please, sir," David begged, stepping a bit closer. He was desperate now. "Just a burger for my daughter. That's all she wants. I won't even order anything for myself. Please don't do this in front of her." At that exact moment, a wealthy, regular customer walked past the host's stand. He bumped slightly into David. In his panic and desperation, David's hand accidentally brushed against Richard's expensive silk tie. It was a complete accident. David was just trying to steady himself. But Richard completely lost his temper. He saw it as a physical assault from a poor, desperate beggar. "Don't you dare touch me, you filthy piece of trash," Richard roared. Before anyone could react, Richard raised his right hand. He swung it with immense force. Slap. The sound was shockingly loud. It echoed fiercely off the high ceilings of the restaurant. The force of the blow was so sudden and strong that David stumbled backward. He lost his balance completely and crashed heavily onto the hard marble floor. The restaurant went dead silent. The clinking of wine glasses and forks instantly stopped. Dozens of wealthy patrons turned around, staring in absolute shock. David lay on the cold floor, his left cheek burning red. His mind was spinning in confusion. He felt a deep, crushing humiliation. "Daddy!" Lily screamed in terror. She threw herself onto the floor beside him, tears streaming down her small face. She wrapped her tiny arms around his neck, sobbing uncontrollably. "Daddy, get up. Please get up." Richard stood over them, straightening his expensive tie. His face was twisted in arrogant rage. "That is what happens when you don't know your place," Richard sneered loudly. "Get out of my restaurant before I have you thrown into a jail cell where you belong." David slowly dragged himself up to his knees. He wrapped his arms around his sobbing daughter, trying to shield her from the cruel stares of the crowd. He felt completely broken. He wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. Richard stepped forward, raising his foot as if he was going to kick David's small pile of crumpled money out into the street. "I told you to get out," Richard shouted. "That is quite enough, Richard." The voice was deep, booming, and completely commanding. It filled the entire restaurant. Richard froze instantly. The anger on his face turned into a look of deep respect and fear. He turned around quickly. Walking out from a private VIP dining room was a tall, incredibly wealthy man in his late 60s. His name was Raymond Stone. Raymond was a legendary billionaire in the city. He owned shipping lines, real estate, and major banks. He was also the primary investor and true owner of the Grand Bistro. Richard was just an employee. Raymond was the man who owned everything. Walking closely behind Raymond was his personal bodyguard, a massive, muscular man named Robert. Robert had a stern face, sharp eyes, and a long scar running down his neck. He had served as Raymond's loyal protector for over 15 years. "Mr. Stone," Richard said quickly, his voice suddenly sounding weak and submissive. "I am so incredibly sorry for the disturbance. This poor beggar snuck inside and was trying to scam our customers. He even put his hands on me. I was simply defending the honor of your restaurant." Raymond Stone did not look at Richard. He looked down at the floor. He saw a young father on his knees, holding a terrified, crying little girl. Raymond's eyes filled with deep disgust, but that disgust was aimed entirely at Richard. "Is this how we treat people here, Richard?" Raymond asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. "A man enters with his child, and you assault him." "But sir, he doesn't belong here," Richard stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Look at him. He is wearing rags. He has no money." David, still on his knees, began to gather his crumpled bills from the floor. His hands were shaking violently from the adrenaline and fear. As he reached out to grab a $20 bill near Richard's shoe, his right shirt sleeve slid up his arm. The movement revealed his bare wrist. Right there on the skin of his inner wrist was a distinct, dark birthmark. It was shaped perfectly like a crescent moon, with 3 small dots clustered right beneath it. It was a highly unusual and striking mark. The massive bodyguard, Robert, had been standing silently behind the billionaire. His job was to watch for threats. But the moment David's sleeve slid up, Robert's eyes locked onto that birthmark. Robert froze completely. His breath caught sharply in his throat. His tough, stoic face suddenly softened. His eyes widened in absolute, utter disbelief. Robert took a sudden step forward, pushing past his billionaire boss. He dropped down to his knees, right in front of David on the dirty floor. Richard was confused. "Robert, what are you doing? Get that trash out of here." Robert completely ignored Richard. He reached out with trembling hands. He gently, almost reverently, took hold of David's right wrist. He pulled the sleeve up further to get a clearer view of the crescent moon birthmark. David flinched slightly, trying to pull his arm back. "Please," David whispered, his voice trembling. "We are leaving. I'm sorry." Robert looked up from the wrist and stared directly into David's face. He scanned David's eyes, his nose, and his jawline. Tears began to well up in the tough bodyguard's eyes. "David," Robert whispered, his voice shaking with intense emotion. "Is your name David?" David blinked in surprise, confusion overriding his fear. "Yes, how do you know my name?" Robert let out a ragged sob. He let go of David's wrist and buried his face in his large hands for a brief second. The entire restaurant watched in absolute, stunned silence. Nobody understood why a terrifying, elite bodyguard was crying over a poor janitor. Robert looked up at the billionaire, Raymond Stone. "Sir," Robert said, his voice choking up. "Sir, look at his wrist. Look at his face. It's him. It's really him." Raymond Stone frowned, stepping closer. He looked down at David's wrist. He saw the crescent moon birthmark. Suddenly, Raymond's face went completely pale. His expensive walking cane dropped from his hand, clattering loudly against the floor. Raymond's knees buckled. The powerful billionaire sank to the floor, right next to David and Robert. "My God," Raymond whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "David, my boy, my beautiful boy." The restaurant was completely silent. Richard stood there, his mouth wide open like a fish out of water. He looked at his billionaire boss, who was now crying and reaching out to touch the poor man he had just slapped. David was completely bewildered. He pulled Lily closer to his chest. "I'm sorry, sir. I think you have me mistaken for someone else. I don't know you. My parents died in a car crash when I was just a baby. I grew up in a strict state orphanage." Raymond Stone let out a heartbreaking cry. He gently placed his hand on David's shoulder. "No, David, you didn't grow up in an orphanage because your parents died. You grew up there because you were stolen from us." Raymond, tears streaming down his wrinkled cheeks, began to explain a tragic story from 30 years ago. Raymond had once been a happily married man with a beautiful baby boy named David. The baby had been born with a highly unique, crescent-shaped birthmark on his right wrist. When David was just 4 years old, Raymond's wife took him to a crowded park in the city. In a split second of distraction, a stranger snatched the little boy away. Raymond had spent millions of dollars searching for his son. He hired private detectives, searched orphanages, and offered massive rewards. The kidnapper was eventually caught a year later, but he refused to say where he had hidden the child. He claimed he had dropped the boy off at a random, distant orphanage under a fake name. Raymond's wife eventually died of a broken heart, leaving Raymond completely alone in his vast financial empire. He had never stopped searching. Robert, who had been hired shortly after the kidnapping, had dedicated his entire life to helping Raymond find his lost son. Robert had memorized every detail of the boy's old photos, especially the unique birthmark. "I never gave up hope," Raymond sobbed, hugging David tightly. "Every single day, I prayed I would find you. And now, you are standing right here in front of me." David sat there, his mind completely numb. All his life, he had felt completely abandoned. He thought nobody in the world cared about him. He thought he was just an unwanted orphan. To discover that he was the son of a loving father who had spent decades searching for him was too much to comprehend. He looked down at his own wrist, then up at Raymond's face. He saw the exact same shape of the nose, He saw the same deep brown eyes. The truth hit him like a tidal wave. "Father," David whispered softly. Raymond cried out in joy, wrapping his arms tightly around his long-lost son. Robert stood up, wiping his eyes, a proud and fiercely protective smile on his face. Lily stopped crying. She looked up at the old man, hugging her daddy. "Are you my grandpa?" she asked in a small, innocent voice. Raymond pulled back, looking at Lily. His heart completely melted. He saw his late wife's beautiful eyes in the little girl's face. "Yes, my beautiful angel," Raymond said softly, wiping her tears away. "I am your grandpa, and I promise you, nobody will ever make you cry again." Suddenly, Raymond remembered exactly where they were. He remembered why his son was on the floor in the first place. The warmth in Raymond's eyes instantly turned into cold, terrifying anger. He stood up slowly, drawing himself to his full height. He turned his gaze toward Richard. Richard was trembling so violently his knees were knocking together. His face was completely white. He realized, with absolute terror, that he had just insulted, humiliated, and physically assaulted the sole heir to the massive Stone fortune. "Mr. Stone, sir," Richard squeaked, dropping to his knees. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. If I had known he was your son, I would have treated him like a king. Please forgive me." Raymond looked down at Richard as if he were a piece of dirt on his shoe. "You would have treated him well only if you knew he was rich. That makes you a monster, Richard. You don't deserve to work in this industry. You don't even deserve to be in this city." Arthur turned to Robert. "Robert, call the police immediately. I want this man arrested for assault on my son. Press the absolute maximum charges. Use our entire legal team to ensure he goes to prison for a very long time." "Right away, sir," Robert said with a cold, satisfied smile. He pulled out his phone and stepped away. "Please, Mr. Stone, have mercy," Richard begged, weeping loudly. "Get him out of my sight," Raymond commanded coldly. Two large security guards from the restaurant quickly grabbed Richard by his arms. They dragged him kicking and screaming out of the dining room, throwing him into the street to wait for the police arrival. The entire restaurant customers erupted into loud applause. Lily stopped crying. She looked up at the old man, hugging her daddy. "Are you my grandpa?" she asked in a small, innocent voice. Raymond pulled back, looking at Lily. His heart completely melted. He saw his late wife's beautiful eyes in the little girl's face. "Yes, my beautiful angel," Raymond said softly, wiping her tears away. "I am your grandpa, and I promise you, nobody will ever make you cry again." Suddenly, Raymond remembered exactly where they were. He remembered why his son was on the floor in the first place. The warmth in Raymond's eyes instantly turned into cold, terrifying anger. He stood up slowly, drawing himself to his full height. He turned his gaze toward Richard. Richard was trembling so violently his knees were knocking together. His face was completely white. He realized, with absolute terror, that he had just insulted, humiliated, and physically assaulted the sole heir to the massive Stone fortune. "Mr. Stone, sir," Richard squeaked, dropping to his knees. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. If I had known he was your son, I would have treated him like a king. Please forgive me." Raymond looked down at Richard as if he were a piece of dirt on his shoe. "You would have treated him well only if you knew he was rich. That makes you a monster, Richard. You don't deserve to work in this industry. You don't even deserve to be in this city." Arthur turned to Robert. "Robert, call the police immediately. I want this man arrested for assault on my son. Press the absolute maximum charges. Use our entire legal team to ensure he goes to prison for a very long time." "Right away, sir," Robert said with a cold, satisfied smile. He pulled out his phone and stepped away. "Please, Mr. Stone, have mercy," Richard begged, weeping loudly. "Get him out of my sight," Raymond commanded coldly. Two large security guards from the restaurant quickly grabbed Richard by his arms. They dragged him kicking and screaming out of the dining room, throwing him into the street to wait for the police arrival. The entire restaurant customers erupted into loud applause.